Hello, viewers. Greeting from Penang International Dental College. You're watching PIDC free webinar series streamed live on PIDC's Facebook page. I am Dr. Fawaz, moderator for today's webinar, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all. Today's topic is on coronavirus disease 19, and as all of you are aware, COVID-19 has negatively impacted everyone's life in a big or a small way. People have lost their lives, they have lost their livelihood in this pandemic. And it is no surprise that the question everyone is asking is COVID 19, will it ever end? To answer this question, Penang International Dental College has invited Professor Dr. Amitav Banerjee from India. Welcome, Professor, to the webinar.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
The chairperson for today's webinar is our Chief Executive Officer and Head of the Department of Community Dentistry, Datin Dr. Nazia Binti Ahmed Azli. Welcome, Datin, to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fawaz, and hello, everyone.
We are also joined by our Dean and Head of the Department of Oral Pathology, Associate Professor Dr. Ajay Tilang, as co-chairperson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Fawaz, and welcome everyone to this webinar.
Before we begin, a gentle reminder for the viewers, please feel free to write in your comments and any questions in the comment box on the Facebook comment box, and we will try to include as many questions as we can in the question and answer sessions. We'll try to answer your questions or reply to your comments, so don't forget to feel free to type in any questions. And without any further delay, I request Datin and Dr. Ajay to kindly begin the webinar. Dr. Datin, Dr. Ajay.
Thank you again, Dr. Fawaz. And once more, Dr. Ajay and I would like to welcome everyone to PIDC free webinar series, which is live on our Facebook page. How is everyone doing? Have we got used to the new normal yet? It's not like we have a choice, right? Like what has been going on for months now, we are still discussing about COVID-19, and I believe we will continue to do so until it comes to an end, which brings us to the question of COVID-19, will it ever end? That is the title of our presentation for today. On behalf of PIDC, we are very fortunate to have Professor Amitav Banerjee on board with us this afternoon on our very first free webinar series. Dr. Banerjee is a professor and head of Department for Community Dentistry at Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Hospital and Research Center, Pune, India. Since his graduation with MBBS from Government Medical College, Jahalpur University way back in 1977, Prof. Banerjee has come a long way. He has been a professor at Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College ever since his premature retirement from the Armed Forces in 2005. Prof. Banerjee has a string of success stories in his name, where he received several awards and accolades, mainly for his research work. He has published more than 100 papers in peer-reviewed both in national and international journals. And one of his published papers on population and samples is now being used as a reading material at Stanford University. Prof. Banerjee has also delivered keynote addresses in national and international conferences and is also a research advisor in one of the universities in Thailand. With such an outstanding CV, we are indeed privileged to have him here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to welcome once again Prof. Banerjee, and this session is now yours, sir.
Thank you, madam. I thank Dr. Nazia for the very kind introduction, which is putting me under pressure because I may not have done a lot, but as far as COVID is concerned, nobody is an expert. So we'll see. We'll ask. In fact, I have been asked one question. I'll be asking more questions during the presentation than giving you answers. I also thank Dr. Ajay, the Dean and Professor of Oral Pathology, and my old friend Dr. Fawaz. So, as I said, I will be asking, you have asked me one question, I will be asking you perhaps more than 10 questions, and we will all try to explore the answers, particularly the young minds. I would like them to think independently, beyond the, beyond the hat thinking or beyond the box thinking, because this is a new problem and sometimes new problems require new answers. So basically, my presentation would be trying to trace the origin, where it originated, then how, after originating from the animal kingdom, how it is transmitted from person to person, and how it is not transmitted, or what were the initial fears. With more information, some of the fears is turning out to be unfounded, because this will give us some clue how to get out of this lockdown or these restrictions or these precautions. And with the new knowledge, we can take some more decisions. Then we will also discuss what are the groups which are vulnerable, which are having high fatalities, because this information is also important, so that we can protect those groups and others who are not vulnerable can resume the economy, which is a major problem as it is turning out all over the world. We will also discuss the different patterns in the different continents, because initially we have some models were projected which were extrapolated to the whole world. But as the COVID has unfolded, we are finding, at least what I have noted, and I will share with you some pattern differences. All the continents are not, all the countries are not having the equal impact. So these are some of the, and from this, what are the hypotheses which are generated, which require further research studies. So this would be my, and then of course the last question, will it ever end? That also perhaps I may not give a straight answer, but again pose some more questions. Whether it will end or whether it will adapt, we will just see. So let us, now I will go to my presentation. I will share my presentation with you, and then we can go back to the. So the first, I would like you, I have given my contact details, email, and if you have some other inputs, you can share to me later also. And this is, I first convey greetings from my institution, from D.Y. Patil Medical College, Hospital Center, Research Center, Pune, India. And I will start my presentation now. And don't be surprised, I am starting with the conclusion. This is not by mixing up my slides, but this conclusion is because just before the pandemic started in December, I had visited Malaysia, AIMS University, to give a talk on latest trends in public health. And I concluded by saying that as per the latest trends with the economic development, most of the countries are having lifestyle disease. And I quoted from Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, mathematician philosopher. He had said that man struggles are in 3 stages. Man against nature, that is infectious diseases, which I adapted as far as our health problems are concerned. Then once he controls infectious diseases, there are the violence, wars. We had the 2 great wars. And once the peace comes in control of infections, we are faced with lifestyle diseases like sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy foods. So I ended this, that now we have controlled infections and we will have to cope with lifestyle diseases even in developing countries. And I ended my talk on this conclusion, and it was followed by loud applause. I don't know whether it was because of my good presentation or because the audience was satisfied that it has ended, was happy that it has ended. So anyway, one of the online, you don't know how the audience is taking it, but at least I immediately, this was in October, immediately within a couple of months, the pandemic started in China. So that's why I will not be concluding in today's talk, because conclusions are proven wrong. Nobody is an expert how the world will unfold. So anyway, this is the AIMS University talk. I had concluded. And this was in just before, a couple of months before the coronavirus originated or mutated in the China. So this is the origins. So we come to here, we are back to stage 1. After thinking that we have controlled the infectious diseases, we are back to the cycle. So we cannot say that these are stages, but again we go back to the assault by humans on environment. Forest cover and habitat of animals are reducing, so there is more interface between man and animal. So once there is more interface, most of the emerging, about 70% of the emerging diseases are of animal origin, so including the present one. So this is where it originated, because of the close interface of animal and man. Still, there are certain unanswered questions. Still, we do not know which is the zero case, but this is the zero place, ground zero. And these are the ones seen where bats, other snakes, and other live animals are also sold with the other food items. So it is believed that the species jump from animal to man took place here. Subsequently, the man-to-man or the person-to-person transmission took over. Now, how it is transmission from person to person? It is direct human contact. Mostly, these are the major routes of transmission. That is direct contact, like shaking hands, coughing, respiratory route, and oral secretions. As dental practitioners, you may be concerned with oral secretions. So this is one of the route. Now, initially when the pandemic started, there was a lot of panic, because any new virus or new pathogen, one has to be extra careful. So the concerns were, virologists, they identified it from food packets, from cardboard, from newspapers, from door handle, from aerosols, asymptomatic carriers. Subsequent research says that these are not very common modes of transmission, because this led to different practices, sanitizing. Of course, we have to practice till we are very sure, but these are not the main routes of transmission. Asymptomatic carriers also became a big cause of panic, because a case report in the New England Journal of Medicine reported about a woman from Shanghai going to Germany and infecting large number of people and coming back. And it was reported as she was asymptomatic. Later, that paper was retracted when they found the history was not taken properly, and she wasn't asymptomatic, she was symptomatic. So this, and subsequently there are some studies which say that asymptomatic carriers do not play a very important role. Particularly for school children, they do not infect their parents. Study from Iceland. And then latest reports from CDC website also mention that these are very rare occurrences. So there should not be any, gradually this can allay the fears of the general public. Then there was again a concern about super spreaders. It has been found a small percentage or 10% of people who can spread to 80% other people. And these 10% people are symptomatic. So there are no asymptomatic super spreaders. So that should give us some comfort. And one of the religious gathering in Korea, one woman spread to large number of people. And other countries also started with religious gathering, because there is a lot of people come together in enclosed space. So these are super spreaders, and the super spreaders also with perhaps with better education, with behavior, they can also be curbed. They can also, their efficiency of spreading can also be curbed if they cover their faces, they cover the cough etiquette, they cover the hand washing. So these super spreaders were more common in the early part of the pandemic when the virus was not well known. Then another concern is the case fatality rate. You see, initial statistics gave a very high case fatality rate because there were the serious cases admitted in hospitals, and particularly from places like Italy and other developed countries, where most of the people who were died were more than 80 years of age. So that gave a very wrong idea of the case fatality rate. And subsequently, there are some other findings which has come, that the hospital cases do not represent the main representative case. For every detected or symptomatic case, there may be 50 to 100 times more who are asymptomatic. And if this is included in the denominator, the infection fatality rate may be as low as 0.3%. You see studies from Germany, US, Sweden, where the infection fatality rate by antibody serosurvey has been very low. Even with that low serosurveillance, the case fatality rate comes down to less than 0.3%. And in countries like Asia and African countries, which has got a much younger population, the case fatality rate may be still lower. And some estimates say in these countries, the case fatality or infection fatality rate may nearer to 0.05%. So if you see it that way, it's not such a lethal disease. Of course, initial fears were there. Nobody knew. And surveys have started in many countries. I don't know whether it has started in Malaysia, but India, we have started the sero surveys. Other countries in different populations, the sero surveys will give us an idea of the actual infection fatality rate in different countries. And what from the other pattern, what I can predict is in Asian and African countries, the infection fatality will be very, very low compared to the Western countries. We will see subsequently, I will show some illustrative data to support this hypothesis. Then what are the preventive strategies? Of course, hand washing, sanitizers, curb etiquette, physical distancing and face masks. This is also important to measures which was, and then subsequently more drastic measures like lockdown or movement control orders. This was to tide over the crisis so that the hospital beds are not overwhelmed. The hospital services are not overwhelmed. And of course, when you have got incomplete knowledge, you have to err on the side of safety. So these measures are there till we get more evidence. And how long, that is the question, because more studies have to be done. Initially, WHO was not advocating face mask for the general population. CDC was not advocating. Subsequently, they advocated. And a recent study in Lancet says it does cut down. From 22% to 10%, it does cut down the infection rate. So, of course, for professionals like people working in dental practice or medical practice, they have to have the face mask, which is of N95 at least, and other PPE, particularly dental surgeons. Control measures, as I said, the most drastic control measures have been locked down. Then there are certain notable exceptions, like in Europe, Sweden did not have a serious lockdown. Japan also, the lockdown was not very strict. They did not have. And we will compare the data because this will give an answer ki how much does lockdown affect the overall mortality. Then who are the groups vulnerable to fatal outcome? This is important because this can guide strategy. If you want to open the economy, if you can protect these people. So the present epidemiology clearly indicates the people where the mortalities are, the comorbidities, that is uncontrolled hypertension, uncontrolled diabetes, renal disease, and obesity. We will see how these things with some data. Elderly and people with comorbidities. Groups with mild or asymptomatic infections. So these are the groups, the children, young adults, healthy elderly with no comorbidities. I have included healthy elderly with no comorbidities because I do not have comorbidity, but I am elderly. If I don't mention it, they will stop my going out also. So I want to go out. I want to enjoy my life. And children and young adults, almost the mortality is 0%. There may be some mortality. In Germany, they did postmortem. They found young people who died of COVID. Postmortem findings, they revealed that they were also having comorbidities, most of them, and they were not aware of it. Others, children may be on immunosuppressive, they may be on anti-cancer treatment. They have to be careful. Young adults with comorbidity. But as far as young adults are concerned, they are almost, the fatality is 0. Infection also they can handle well. Most of them may be asymptomatic. And this itself can form a herd. Without a conventional herd immunity, if the large number of population, particularly in countries like Asia, countries like Africa, large number of population do not contribute because of their innate immunity, because of their age, or because of other factors. The transmission, the pandemic does not impact them as severely as the European countries where the elderly population is more. So this is a very important here. And this also, you all must be wondering, when you go back to practice, most of the working hands are young working hands in dental practice, medical practice. So those who are young, they can safely go back perhaps to practice with minimum risk. Even if they get infection, they will be asymptomatic. Even if they get symptomatic, the mortality is almost less than 0.05 in young people. Even in healthy people, say elderly, I am 65 years old, I will be defined as an elderly. The mortality from hospitals are 3%, say 3% or 4% in elderly or with comorbidity. That means if I get COVID, I get admitted as a case, 97% or 95% chances are I will recover fully. Boris Johnson recovered, Prince Charles recovered. So if I am not having comorbidity, there are 97% chance of my recovery. At my age, above 65, there may be 20% chance of my getting a malignancy. And if I get a surgery, I go to the surgeon, he may say your 5-year survival is say 90%. Are you going to take a chance? I will take a chance because 90% at my age is good enough. So similarly, even why should I be afraid of COVID at my age? That I have a 97% chance of survival without any treatment, just by supportive treatment or some oxygen. So I just want to see if you, instead of fatality, if you see from the survival point of view, as an elderly also, I may like to live my life a little better than being locked down. And my survival is 97%, even if I get the disease. So this is just to put things in perspective, to allay the panic. Then these are the, I was saying that there is a very distinctive pattern. The highest fatalities in USA and European countries, this data is about 5-6 days old, but the pattern still continues. So the European and American countries, the death rate is per million. I am comparing death because death data is more accurate compared to, say, cases depends on the testing rates and other things. The deaths, most of the countries, all countries require death registration by law. So if we see the very, very obvious 300 to 800 deaths per million from COVID, you can see this in the worldometer. You have coronavirus worldometer. Asian countries, it ranges from 0.5 to 10 deaths per million. African countries are still lower. So if you see the marked difference, so that is telling a story which we should find out. I will compare another analogy I give as a community medicine epidemiologist. I say ki, who is this? Actually, this was all the slides, some of the I have taken from my last presentation in AIMS University, Malaysia. So anybody, I used to give the quiz, and anybody used to answer correctly, I used to throw a chocolate at him or her. But here we are online. So anyway, I am giving the answer. He is the former king of chess of India, Viswanath Anand. 3 months he was locked in Germany. Just last week he came back to India. So even the king of chess is mated by COVID. So why I compare epidemiology with chess? Because like a clinician plays a chess like a beginner, or he looks at the epidemiology problem like a beginner. That corona is queen. We are looking only, the experts or the virologists or the clinician is only looking at the queen, not looking at the other pieces. But from the epidemiological point of view, sometimes in chess, the queen can also be trapped by other pieces, depending on the bad position or depending on the combination of the other pieces. So chess gives a clue to look at a bigger picture. It's a mind game. It can be a public health game to hone your skills to look at the bigger picture. The other chess pieces can mate the queen or trap the queen if they are. So similarly, the COVID is playing out on a global chessboard. Different countries, the white side is that side, black side is this side. The pieces are different in both the sides. The relation of the pieces are different. So this is, I have just tale of 3 continents. I had tabulated data. I'll give you the reference at the end of many countries. So just to not to clutter the PowerPoint presentation, I have taken some examples from, say, European countries, and the pattern is same in most of the European countries. USA, and I have tried to correlate it with overweight prevalence and median age. This gives a idea of the elderly population. USA 38 median age, Spain 42, Sweden 42. Most of the developed and American countries, America and European countries have above 40 median age. Whereas Asian countries, the median age is less, except for Japan. Japan is having the age much more than the European countries also. And whereas you go to African countries, all have got very low median age. That means elderly population will be very less. So these are crude, quick and dirty look, but it is still telling a story. And the combination of overweight, most of the countries in Europe have got BMI more than 25, 68% population overweight. The 62% overweight in Spain and 57. Whereas the Asian countries have got low overweight prevalence except Malaysia. Again, you see Malaysia is one of the fastest developing economy in Southeast Asia with development of economy. That's why my last presentation was lifestyle disease in growing economies. So, however, it has got a lower age compared to the European countries. So it has got a low death per million, like other Asian countries. I mean, these are the things which we can see from the data available in the public domain, median age and overweight. Another fascinating thing is Japan. Though Japan has got a higher age, it has got a very low overweight prevalence, 27%. So its mortality is 7 per million. You see, and another interesting feature is Japan never did a lockdown as strict as other countries. Still there is. Malaysia has controlled it perhaps by government measures. Thailand is again interesting. It is overweight is less. Age is higher than Malaysia, just neighboring countries, and its death per million is 0.8. So overweight is 10 units less than Malaysia. So is it overweight playing a major role than even age, or the combination of these two things? Now we see the African countries also, most of the cases are 9 and 10. And the two African countries like Egypt and South Africa having very high overweight, and they have got in the African countries, they have got the highest death per million, but still not as much as European. Kenya is low, Ethiopia is low. And so this overweight is coming out to be major determinant. There are some studies in influenza, obesity does increase the fatality from influenza. Now the studies are there that it does increase the fatality from COVID also. And of course, age is because age, this overweight is a co-marker, is a surrogate marker of overweight goes with other comorbidity also. So it is a surrogate marker of comorbidities. Age is a surrogate again of comorbidity. As a person age, he develops or she develops hypertension, diabetes, malignancy, and other things. His immune system gets compromised. Besides that, now there is another hypothesis which is coming up. Like densely crowded populations like Africa and some of India is very crowded. In fact, India the slum population is almost 6.5 crores people stay in slums in India, which is bigger than many European countries, and still the mortality is 4 per million. So there's another hypothesis which is coming up, that is there may be other coronaviruses like common cold coronaviruses, where people staying in densely packed air, they may be getting cross immunity to the COVID-19 because the coronavirus, other coronaviruses. So this requires to hypothesis, because if this is true, then we may have a different strategy for developing countries, because there the social distancing and other things may bring down this immunity and they make them vulnerable to other. I don't know. This is just a question. I don't have any answers, but these are points to be kept in mind. So these are the questions which are I have given this three countries from 3 continents. You can, the world data is available of all the countries, almost 200 countries data is available, and continent wise young people can tabulate the data and tabulate the overweight prevalence as well as the median age, and you can see the pattern. Consistent pattern is coming depending on the continent. So whether these questions are thrown up, whether age is an effective modifier, whether obesity is a bigger effect modifier of the impact, whether cross immunity from other coronavirus protects, or a combination of all the factors. Yesterday I was hearing an expert say that in some population 80% people may not be vulnerable even without herd immunity, because they may have some innate immunity. Innate immunity may be conferred by all this, or T cell immunity or other factors, so they may not play a part in transmission. So the question remains, so he was a European epidemiologist. As an Asian epidemiologist, we have to think, do we have something? Do we have something in our population which makes it, because the data is showing marked difference. It is not a matter of 10 or 20 deaths, it's a matter of hundreds of death difference from the European countries. So if there's no government measures can explain for such differences. So this is a thing which I wanted to emphasize. Then the other unanswered questions are, how accurate is COVID-19 RT-PCR test? Here also, because sometimes the dead virus also, it picks up as a RNA particles as a positive test when the virus may be dead. Sometimes you may miss, depends on how you collect. So it's not a very accurate test, and whether we can, most of the models go on these inputs. Then is it a solely respiratory disease? You must have also heard that initially people were put on ventilator, the mortality increased. Then they realized that it is a disease like something like a high altitude sickness where the oxygen is required. So most of them do very well under oxygen under pressure. So then are we counting all the COVID deaths, or we are overcounting or undercounting? This is again a thing which sometimes elderly people die with COVID because of other conditions. So they are labeled as COVID deaths, which inflates the figure. And of course, in developing countries, some COVID deaths may be missed. So these are some of the questions. And sometimes, like many respiratory pathogens, they become commensals in the throat. Even healthy people you may find. So COVID is a new disease. We have to be extra cautious. We label them as a case. So whether it can become a commensal without causing the disease, the person may die of some other disease. Then shall we wait for a vaccine which is not there yet? I mean, that is again a question, because now if the people question that there is herd immunity does not protect, then the vaccine is also working on the same principle. It is also eliciting the antibodies. So this is again a question which a reasonable person can find the answer. Will deaths due to poverty overtake the gains achieved by lockdown? Already the data is showing that they are, particularly a country like India, I can give examples. Daily, 1,400 people die of tuberculosis daily. 2,000 children die of under 5 of various causes. So that means every month we are losing 40,000 people to tuberculosis, young people. So compared to that, whether poverty, these are diseases of poverty. Then another question is whether positive antibiotic tests confer herd immunity. Whether IgG, IgM, particularly IgG, whether they are markers of immunity is being questioned. As I said, the same question comes to whether vaccine can confer herd immunity. But there are other factors. People are researching that there may be other sources or other modes of immunity, like T cell immunity, CD4 count. There may be immunity due to, as I said, cross infection with other coronaviruses. Then there may be, as I said, 80% people may have something which will not make them susceptible to COVID, particularly in developing countries. So this is, again, question remains. And now they are developing in Pune itself, they have developed neutralizing tests, whether they are testing the antibodies with a live virus. It requires BSL-3 lab. And if you have neutralizing antibodies, that will definitely confer immunity. So that research is going on. Then whether the mortality during the period or the pandemic are always due to coronavirus, that is obvious. Each country will have its own priorities. So each country has to make public health, policy makers have to see whether trying to balance one, when like in the game of chess, you are trying to save say pawn, and you lose a major piece like a bishop or a queen just to save a pawn. So one has to balance like a game of chess, whether you are trying to save a minor piece where the mortality even in the compromise is say 3 to 5% or 10%, and in the non-compromise like young people the mortality is less than 0.05%. So as far as mortality is concerned, it is a pawn. So trying to save a pawn, whether you are losing a queen, which like other diseases I said, like childhood malnutrition, starvation, economic livelihoods, as Dr. Fawaz said in the beginning, the many livelihoods are being robbed. These are major pieces in the chessboard. So trying to save a pawn Initial reaction may be justified by governments because that was a new virus. We didn't know how lethal it is, but now with the data, we may have to. Then, as I said, how effective are mass social distancing and lockdowns? That again, more research will tell us. In the interim, till we have information, it is better to err on the side of safety. But of course, many countries are gradually relaxing lockdowns. And of course, most important is what proportion of the pandemic is panic driven, because the panic is going as fast as the actual virus, and it is causing a lot of anxiety attacks, suicides, domestic violence, and other phobias. So then again, this is COVID-19 a public health priority? Again, each country has to decide depending on the other health priorities. It may be in the European countries because they have got an elderly population who are vulnerable. In Asian countries, in African countries, we have got young population who are vulnerable to other diseases of malnutrition, of poverty, and they are immune to COVID-19 deaths. So again, we have to, each country has to take its own call. How much we can trust publications of COVID-19, even the topmost journals? I was just seeing a recent note in a retraction watch, which keeps a note of retractions. It mentioned that in the pressure to publish COVID-19, a lot of researchers are rushing through publications, and even in the first-rate journals, third-rate articles are being published, which in normal times will not be published even in a third-rate journal. So if you see yourself, every day there is a retraction. Today only there is a retraction on hydroxychloroquine from Lancet. One day WHO is saying that hydroxychloroquine is to be given. Other day it says the trials have to be stopped. Now again it has said that trials can continue. So it is a question that's why I said even the experts do not have the answers. We have to look for answers yourself. Young minds also have to get together, search for patterns, search for answers. Then are drugs and vaccine the only answer to fight COVID-19? If they come, well and good. Vaccine will come, people can take vaccine. But that in the interim, as I said, if even an elderly person maintains weight, maintains exercise, maintains healthy food, treatment of comorbidities, very important. Just because you have comorbidity doesn't make you vulnerable. If you have got hypertension, if you control your hypertension, if you control your diabetes, if you have got diabetes, you will come down to the baseline risk. Your excess risk will disappear. So even even studies have found that most of the deaths in even Europe, particularly USA, has been amongst the marginalized people, minority people who do not have access to the hypertension treatment, who did not have access to the diabetes treatment. So that is the answer you have got. You can fight COVID before drugs and vaccine by modifying your lifestyle. So this is the final pathway, whether it is non-communicable disease, lifestyle matters. So now this COVID has taught us that even in a communicable disease, your lifestyle can prevent you without drugs and vaccine. If you maintain your weight, age you cannot reduce, but of course weight, if you take the example of Japan, even very elderly people, but they have got a overweight rate lower than many Asian countries, 27% compared to over 60% in European countries. So Japan is a good example that even elderly who maintain their weight, and maintain weight has to be by lifestyle, healthy food and exercise, they can beat the COVID. So there is hope. Now this is the last question, that will it ever end? So as I said, last time I came to Malaysia, I concluded something, and within a couple of months I was proved wrong. Even Bertrand Russell was proved wrong. So I won't have a conclusion. I will just throw the question and give you some of my own insight. We can always keep searching, particularly in science. In science, we cannot be dogmatic. I have found the truth. Beware of the person in science who says he has found the answer. He has found this drug. He has found this vaccine. He has found whether it will end or not. But from whatever over the years, scientific year, even if it doesn't end, it cannot continue being virulent. You see, as per the Darwin's law of evolution, it is survival of the fittest. Fittest doesn't mean that you have to kill to survive. Fittest means you have to have a symbiotic relationship. Only those organisms which develop a symbiotic relationship with the host, that is the human to human transmission, now host is humans. The virulent strains will kill the host, and with the host it will also die. Because host dies, the virus also dies. So those strains which have got a genetic makeup for virulence will perish with the host like a suicide bomber. Other strains which will selected, which are less virulent, which will not kill the individual, which will lead to asymptomatic infection, and then so that it can survive, the host also survives, the virus also survives. Then it will transmit to person and it will outnumber the virulent strains. So with age, COVID will also become benign. I can give my example. When I was young, I was an angry young man. I used to fight with everyone and I lost many opportunities. Now I am old, I know how to be diplomatic. So COVID-19 will also become diplomatic, not antagonizing people. So I am surviving better in my old age than I survived in my young age. And COVID will also become benign and you can live with it without neither the virus will die, neither we will die, because it will accumulate. And as I said, younger people will be immune to it with our natural immunity. So most of your working hands, particularly dental professionals, have to work in the field where the virus is also there. So they will develop immunity fast. When vaccine comes, they will be protected. They can take the precautions as they are taking personal precaution, and it will become milder disease. It will, whether it ends or not, it may end subsequently. Before the vaccine comes also it can end. After vaccine comes, it can be eradicated, like we eradicated smallpox. But again, the question comes with a mortality of 0.1%, whether efforts to identify each and every case is worth the cost benefit part of it. So I've ended here.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Banerjee, on your insights on COVID-19. Will it ever end? I should tell you that I am really pleased to share a presentation that has been so positive and encouraging for all of us viewers over here. Because whenever you go on to news media channels, the only aspect that they are talking about is the rising infection as well as the mortality that's taking place in different countries, making it look like doomsday is right around the corner. But as you have clearly mentioned, that as the virus, as we progress through, the virus will attenuate and its virulence will come down. So thank you very much, Prof. I would like to start this session, question answer session, with a question from my side. The question that I'd like to ask you, Prof, is that what similarities would you draw between the 1918 Spanish flu and COVID-19, considering the fact that the Spanish flu actually lasted nearly a decade and killed over 50 million people?
This is a very good question, and I thank Ajay, Dr. Ajay, for giving me an opportunity to vent my anger on this question. Anybody? Because I consider this comparison totally out of. I mean, this comparison is just not correct, because that was 100 years ago, exactly 1918, almost 100 years ago. That was the time of pre-antibiotic era where we didn't have antibiotics. And I also checked the literature. That time, we didn't have even antibiotics for even bacterial infections. And if you see the natural history of viral influenzas, including the flu, most of the deaths occurred due to secondary bacterial infection. And since there were no antibiotics, the deaths were many, and due to pneumococcal infections, streptococcal infections, bacterial infections. So antibiotics, present day, we can never have the same. Secondly, that was at the time of great hardship, where the world has finished the world. The First World War had just come to an end. So immunity, overall immunity was very low, and we should never compare 1918 with present day. If you have to compare a recent one, I would like to compare it with 2009 H1N1. You see, in 2009 H1N1 swine flu influenza, they say the same thing more or less came back again. 1918 we had H1N1, the same thing we had in 2009. I was there, same college I was here. That time we were having more cases, at least in India, H1N1. Why? Because H1N1 was affecting people, younger people. It was the epidemiology was just opposite of COVID. H1N1 was, the mortality was 80% more below 60 years. And above 60 years, the mortality was very low. Like we have COVID now, younger people are spared. And the reason given was those who are above 60, they have been exposed to the earlier 1918 strain, so they have got some immunity. That was one of the hypotheses. So you can imagine one natural infection can give immunity for decades. And that time, young people, the mortality was 6% in India. Here we have got 3% mortality. So that's why I say if we compare that with that context, we manage H1N1. We have got a vaccine for H1N1. How many people take it? We have not been able to eradicate it. So this, if people know the exact data that we have, and in fact, there was more reason to be worried in H1N1 2009 because the young school children, the first death in India was in a school child. Younger people were dying. That was more loss to the economy, and that time we had reason to fear more. So that 1918, I would not like to compare.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think you've actually given us a lot of clarity on this topic, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers who are here might be having questions in their mind. Please feel free to actually type out your questions, and then we will take them. So I would like to we do have a question from one of our viewers, Mr. Sumit Roy, who asks, "Sir, is the lockdown and other measures also helping the containing the spread of pulmonary tuberculosis and other respiratory diseases that also spread like COVID?"
This is again a very good question. Actually, again, you see, most of the respiratory infections are spread in close contact. So if you have got tuberculosis, and if you are particularly in an Indian slum, where, as I said, the population of Indian slums are more than 6 crores. So many people will be transmitting tuberculosis. In fact, you will be increasing the spread of tuberculosis, firstly. Secondly, because of the lockdown, a lot of people are not getting treatment for other diseases. Even tuberculosis is being neglected. What is happening, at least in India, is that most of the tuberculosis field workers have been diverted to COVID work, even the testing facilities. So the tuberculosis detection rate has become very less. So in fact, on the contrary, it may increase the other. And in lockdown, people 3 months, I have put on 1 kg. So I am more vulnerable obesity to COVID also. So in the lockdown, in the long run, we will increase the vulnerability to COVID if we don't do physical activity and lockdown. So this is a very difficult question, but time will tell. Secondly, and the lockdown measures, as epidemiologists say, it cannot prevent it, it just prolongs it. It just doesn't flatten it over a period of time. And that's why Sweden is saying, I have compared the data of Sweden. Sweden is not doing very badly compared to other European countries which are having lockdown. So that is, again, Japan is doing not badly, if you see. So these are questions which we have to answer. In fact, I remember a Swedish epidemiologist was asked this question. He says these answers will be available in April 2021. After 1 year, you have to do the scoreboard. This match is not a one-day cricket match. It is a 1 year. All pandemics, the answers are available after 1 year.
Okay, right. Thank you, Prof. Datin, would you like to add something on this?
Yeah, I have a question actually. It's interesting what you're telling us is something new. But whatever it is, it's still a long way. And for now, the pandemic is here to stay at this point. Yeah. So I just want to ask your opinion. Like as you mentioned, for us dental professionals, we are supposedly to be at the highest risk, considering the transmission, the way it is transmitted. So, in your opinion, how do dental professionals balance their moral duty of not contributing to the transmission of this disease by reducing routine care and only attend to emergency treatment as compared to their financial concerns?
This is a
How should,
very
yeah.
This is a very difficult question, and you have to really balance. And you see, as I said, younger dentists can be in the field. Senior dentists, because as I said, younger people are not only immune; they are not super spreaders. They do not spread. They will get asymptomatic. Firstly, young people below 40 years should work in the procedures. Others can give consultation without coming in direct contact with the patients. And uh, other thing is they should not overexpose. There should be a proper shift. They say ki if you have overexposed, the viral load is more. Even the healthcare workers and particularly dentists are in the front line. They are should not wear proper. Particularly, you generate lot of aerosols. I mean, you are dealing with
Yeah.
other things. So that goggles and other things, protection should be there. And if you have got any symptoms of say influenza-like illness, you should self-isolate so that you do not spread. Because there are two concerns. First is getting infected yourself and suffering from it. Other is that spreading it as a nosocomial to other healthcare workers, other patients. So if you can isolate yourself, if you have got the first symptom, that is one thing. Secondly, if you find that yes, you have got immunity, like if you subsequently now they say ki antibody IgG may not say ki whether immune or not, but young age will give you the immunity. And as far as I think pediatric dentists are concerned, they may be a little safe because young people, children are not very old. Elderly people who are looking after elderly people, there you have to take a call whether how much suppose you have got a severe osteomyelitis, it has to be attended to. So with proper precautions, I think one can proceed. And nowadays in most hospitals, they are doing a COVID test also before attending to the cases. So suppose a serious patient comes who require immediately dental surgery or oral surgery, some trauma cases. So you have to, firstly, of course, you have to save the life first, and you have to take the extra precautions of say goggles and N95 mask and the PPE here. And once you have a COVID test positive, you have to be extra cautious. If a COVID test negative, and by and large, one should expose the young professionals to surgical.
Okay, thank you, Prof. At this point, we have stringent guidelines and SOPs that we have to follow. But considering what you mentioned, because you have some sort of classification of the patients, you know, the young children, the young adult will be considered based on their risk. So does that mean that we can loosen a bit? For
Yes.
example, for the young adults, there's no really, for the children, probably if we are treating the children, there is no really a requirement to put on the N95, for instance. Because if we were to follow strictly the guidelines and SOPs, eventually the dental care or the dental cost will be
Yes,
escalating.
definitely.
Escalating, and this will be a burden to the dental practitioners.
You
So,
may,
do you agree? Yeah.
like cosmetic surgery and other things, you can postpone. That surgery, like infections, that had to be taken care of because it will cause more comorbidities. So, elective surgery, like say cosmetic surgery or malocclusion and other things. So, we have to take a call that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have a question from one of our viewer. This is Prabha Manikam, and she asks, Prof, are pregnant women more vulnerable to the disease?
No. They
No.
are not
Okay.
vulnerable. We have got, at least they are not vulnerable. H1N1 2009, they were more vulnerable. COVID has not shown extra impact on pregnant women. They are people who are delivering safely.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think that answers that question. We have another question from Sindhu Mrityunjaya, who asks if anything. Could you share more about the use of hydrochloroquine? Could you bring that? Give us more clarity on what's going on and whether it's of use.
That even the WHO cannot answer with a straight face. So why you?
So I think we'll have to wait and watch and see how this goes. A lot of questions are coming in here. There's another one that says, due to the lockdown, many healthcare services like immunization, oncology treatment have been delayed. What would you suggest to overcome future morbidities due to these? As of now, this is from Nidhi.
Exactly. This question I was asked. I asked my professor of pediatrics yesterday. We have a Wednesday vaccination for children that was stopped. I said, why you have stopped a vaccination which is measles vaccine? So measles kills so many children. We have got a very efficient vaccine, waiting for a vaccine which we have not manufactured, and we will have more deaths from child death from measles. So yesterday he restarted the immunization program. So you have to take a call. And other diseases, as I said, each country has to take a call because we have got children. We cannot neglect childhood diseases. Now we are having 2,000 deaths every day in India under 5 mortality. Now UNICEF has projected we will have 4,000. I mean, this is something, we have to balance in public health lives versus lives, So if we are only trying, as I said, you are trying to save a pound, you are losing a bigger piece. So we have to take a call. We have to have a proper country priorities. This is my priorities. I am losing more lives from this. And as I said, young people, COVID, the mortality is very less, 0.1% infection mortality rate. So we have to take a call, and I think high time people must be realizing, the policymakers also must be realizing, because initially we didn't know how severe it is. So the initial measures one cannot criticize because we were totally unknown waters. And every day we are having new year, and most of the, I am happy to say, most of the research is reassuring. As they unfold, most of the research is reassuring.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, Prof. We have another question from our viewer, Surya Dripta Ghosh, if I'm spelling that right. I think so. It's now on your screen. So, what are the immediate measures that can be taken after the lockdown is over, when every office, school, and public transport will start at their full capacity, to minimize the huge spread of the infection, as the infectivity rate of this of COVID-19 is much higher?
I have an interesting take on this. I also used to wonder why the COVID started in China in December. Why first it should go? I think first case outside China was Thailand, just your neighboring country. Then actually Italy, then Europe, then USA. Then suddenly we realized it has come to India, Bangladesh, and we started. So I just was wondering whether COVID took a tour package from Thomas Cook. First I will visit Thailand. First I will visit Italy. Then I chalo Taj Mahal dekh lete, India bhi aa jate. So I think with the present global travel, it's not like that. It's people travel simultaneously all over the world. If it had come to Italy, you see, it became manifest there because the large number of elderly died. The scorecard went up very high. So it was brought to attention. I was reading yesterday only, the research has come out. In fact, America also, they are saying that COVID had been there since December in America also, because Chinese and all China connection is very strong. Similarly, Asian countries, Bangladesh is directly connected with China. Bangladesh is a very crowded, highly dense population of 16 crores. 3 UK can come there. And still the death rate is in single digit in Bangladesh. India also, the recent study yesterday, I was reading a news item that India also, the COVID had come in November, December, because of genomic studies, they could actually trace it. So most likely we already had it has run through the population, and this is one hypothesis. And probably because of innate immunity and young population, it has not affected us as badly. So now we are going to start, in fact, the best experiment was the Indian slums of 6.5 crore people. Of course, we are having a major caseload today at Dharavi, that is the Bombay slum. It's world famous. We are having a large number of cases, but that is the worst. I mean, it cannot be more crowded even in open up. In fact, if the slum people go out to work, they will be less crowded in the slums. They are staying in one room, there are 4, 5, 10 people stay. They are sharing the common toilet. Social distancing is a joke there. Even sanitation is a joke. If they wash their hands every hour, they will not have drinking water or water for cooking, and they have survived the onslaught. So my take, of course, it's a personal view, and as the lockdown is lifted up, we will have better data. But again, I am optimistic. I am optimistic because the sky exactly did not fall on us in spite of so much congestion. So I am taking solace from Bangladesh also, Pakistan also. You see, Pakistan is directly considered Iran. They had a huge cluster initially, but it did not catch fire. And Pakistan also, the lockdown was very late, and still they are not. And in European countries, in spite of lockdown, they are having the surge of cases. They had the surge of cases. Now it is coming down. In developing countries, we tried lockdown, but particularly in densely populated countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, how effectively we can do the lockdown, we have seen. It's not possible. So in spite of that, if we didn't have I don't expect a second peak. Again, it's a personal opinion. Again, it's a question. I mean, I will
Okay,
not.
all right. Looks like a lot of questions still lead us to more questions. So that's where we are. So moving on forward, we still there are a lot of questions that are coming in here, but I'll have to take and cluster them a little. So I think we'll take the question from Mr. Pritham Ghosh. In some parts of Southeast Asia, authorities have started to measure zero prevalence in the community setup. Do you think it is useful for a future strategy?
Yes. This is very useful. It will give us two things. Like if we find a large number of people have already faced the infection, forget about herd immunity. Forget about herd immunity because it's not, herd immunity may not be the main thing. If we find a large number of all been exposed to the virus, that increase the denominator. The case fatality, infection fatality will go down to 0.001 or 0.005, which I expect in a developing countries with young population. So that will be very reassuring. And this zero prevalence can also give us whether herd immunity has come. But sometimes in some countries that in spite of like very affected belt, like COVID affected belt like Germany in some towns or New York. New York, the maximum zero positivity was 30% or 20%. So the people who are saying it is 20% for herd immunity, you require say 60% or 80%. So this is not black and white. This is not all or none. Even if 20% people have got herd immunity, their immediate friends, neighbors, they will protect them also. So 20% herd immunity will protect 40% of the population. 40% herd immunity will protect 60% of the population. 60% will protect say 100 population. It is like that. So if this is even a little herd immunity should be reassuring, and it can help a future strategy for the two ways. Firstly, the case fatality rate will be revised. Secondly, it can tell us that these populations are immune.
All right. Okay. So the baseline remains that all countries should be testing more.
Yes. This will give a better picture. As I said, RT-PCR is also not very accurate. At least it will give us how it has spread, how many population, and definitely it will tell us about the subclinical cases.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. So we also have a question from Lahari Telang. So she said she would like to ask you that do you suppose that COVID was always existing and may have only been diagnosed recently? What is your take on that?
It can be possible. So many. We are discovering new planets, so we might have discovered a new virus. I mean, I think you should take away the microscope from the virologist. Most problem will be solved. Because you see, if you see the data, it is just like a bad flu season. Particularly the Western countries are saying it is something like a bad flu season. So if you didn't have this PCR, probably you were taking it as a bad flu season. So it might have been there. We don't know. I am not a virologist, so my knowledge may be limited. But it's possible.
Prof. Banerjee, if I may ask, you have actually selected two effect modifiers as to compare against the death in countries like the age and the overweight, right? So are these two common data that you have found out from your studies? Are these the two common ones or the two main ones?
This is actually, I have taken what is available hard data in the public domain, because we don't have access to other data, but this is anybody can compare. And this is available in the public domain. The overweight prevalence from WHO site is available. And the worldometer gives the, so these is particularly deaths. And median age is available in the public domain. So this I could actually compare. These are ecological studies and the pattern. I mean pattern, and when we are finding such a large difference, can I share another slide references I forgot? Can I share one slide? I will just references I forgot to share. Am I sharing the slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will just ask you to current slide. So these are some of the references like demography, science aids in understanding. There is a paper which says there is a strong correlation of age structure with the death rate. So this paper is available. Then there is a obesity on influenza virus, and now papers are available on COVID also. Then this is a paper on the cross immunity with other coronaviruses. Of course, these two data I can say obesity and age I could see from the public domain. This of course I don't have, but the papers are coming. And this is a very good presentation by a professor from Oxford University, Dr. Sunetra Gupta. She says the epidemic is on its way out. She is a professor in Oxford University. In fact, she had reservations about the Neil Ferguson's model. Now she is the one who has also hypothesized that the epidemic might have been existing earlier also, some November, December. So if anybody interested can see this presentation you can just do Google search Sunetra Gupta and you will find a YouTube. It's very educative and very reassuring. And of course, I have also published for a lay person that this is the link I have given. Corona is queen, but other chess pieces matter. It is the same thing which I presented. I only gave three countries from each continent. In this, I have compared some more countries. And as I said, the reader who is interested can also.
Okay, Prof, talking about Malaysia, it is classified under the continent of Asian continent, right? But if you look at the data that you showed earlier in your slides, Malaysia has got a high percentage of obesity compared to the other countries that you mentioned. So, in your opinion, if you have studied about what has been done in Malaysia to combat this COVID-19, do you think it is the way the lockdown, or here we did not have a lockdown, or rather we had a MCO, which is just a restriction of movement. So how do we conclude the success of Malaysia?
Malaysia has got an obesity of 40%. Not exactly obesity, it is overweight. More than BMI is more than 25. So it is 42%. It is still lesser than the Western countries where it is above 60%. So compared to Asian countries, it is slightly more on the obesity side. But the age is again lower. Median age is 30. So it is compared to European countries. So it is a combination of obesity and other things. And of course, as you said, the measures of movement control and other things. These are temporary measures. Ultimately, the total cases will even out over the year. That's what they say. You can only postpone, because if you are put in lockdown, once you come out, there will be surge. So my take is that perhaps they may not be, because the pandemic has been there before the lockdown, and large number of people who are vulnerable have been exposed. Say vulnerable elderly people, particularly. What problem I think is that we have taken every cue from the Western countries and European countries. Their measures we directly. So probably we had a different demographic. Of course, in the beginning you can't blame. Nobody had an idea. As the epidemic or pandemic evolved, we came to know that younger people are not spared, because in H1N1 younger people were also spared. So we cannot know in advance that younger people will be spared. But now we have this information which is well established. So and most of the working people are young people. So they can take a call, open the lockdown, business can be revived without, I think, minimum casualties. And I wouldn't be, even as an elderly, I would say I have no comorbidities. I will try to control my weight, and I am going to take the 3% chance of mortality. I tell my other people, ki, yaar, we have lived your life. 97% if I survive COVID, good enough.
Yeah.
That at my age, that is good enough. I mean, at my age, if I have to take a call for an operation, also surgeon says कि यार 90% है. I said take a call, yeah. Yeah.
It is actually, Prof, with that kind of thinking that we live longer, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we just have time for some more questions. We have a question here from one of our viewers called Starkate, and she's asking that she's just wondering why is it taking so long for for the vaccine?
Vaccine, it will take longer.
I think the question is why does it take time?
देखिए, we don't have a vaccine for common cold also. That's a less benign types of coronas. So vaccine is a promise. I can stop at that. Vaccine is a promise. But I mean, vaccine, what about other logistics? How many people can you vaccinate? What are the vaccination coverage? Like even the available vaccine, the vaccination coverage is not 100%. How many of you have taken H1N1 vaccine, which kills the young people? I asked the young people in my class also, okay, how many of you have taken H1, which kills the young people? So, I mean, here, waiting for a vaccine, it takes time. You see, what happens, even if a vaccine is developed, you have to see whether it protects, how much it protects. So you should have, say, randomized controlled trials, and it's not easy actually. To make a vaccine is a difficult thing. If they do it, it's I would say, like they made Tata Nano in 1 year, that's something like that. So that is I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I have my reservations about vaccine, about the safety issues particularly, because I wouldn't take it before others have taken it.
All right. Okay, I think we'll just take one more last question from the viewers, and that's a question from Neelima Maurya, and she says, is there any relationship between BCG vaccination and COVID? I think that's quite an interesting thing that she's brought up.
I compare BCG vaccination with government servants. They don't do their own job. How you expect them to do other person's job? Because BCG vaccination in India does not protect against tuberculosis itself. So this actually this was a hypothesis which came because again initially people again noticed the patterns which we have noticed, that the Western countries were getting the African and Asian countries were not getting it. So most of the African and Asian countries are having BCG vaccination. So there was that, suppose it may be a correlation. So that hypothesis was based on that. So it may have to, I mean, we don't have any firm evidence either way except for this correlational pattern. And the same correlational pattern I have also applied with age and overweight. So, but age and overweight, there is a biological plausibility. BCG, I wouldn't know exactly because I am not a microbiologist or immunologist, but I have my doubts because it doesn't protect against tuberculosis, what it is supposed to protect.
Okay, all right. I think thank you so much, Professor Banerjee. I think to summarize, your presentation has put light on what had actually, how the disease actually progressed and has reached its present situation. And I think your presentation at this point in time is timely for us because most nations are at a stage where they're looking at easing down lockdowns and going back to work. So maybe I could get one last feedback from yourself and Datin on the fact that do you think that we will see a more positive trend by the end of this year?
Surely, we should because I mean we are opening up. We are opening up, and
I think
gradually we will get more confidence as the data comes out, and particularly the results of zero surveys come out. So we will be reassured.
And with more experience, I think we will learn to live with it, hopefully safely.
Yeah. There is a Hindi movie. I mean, some of you can understand Hindi movie. I think in Agnipath, somebody said कि अगर दुश्मन मजबूत है तो दुश्मन को हराना नहीं चाहिए, दुश्मन के साथ जीना चाहिए. इसमें आपकी भी उम्र बड़ी हो जाती है, दुश्मन की उम्र बड़ी होता है. Translated in English is that If your enemy is stronger than you, no point in killing it. You start living with it, your life also increases, the enemy life also increases.
Make friends with it.
We will we will come to a symbiotic here. We will come to a coalition government like most governments survive. We have got so many pathogens. You see, if tuberculosis kills 10% even with treatment, 90%, I mean, even with, we have got an MDR. So if you see in that context, tuberculosis kills, typhoid kills 5%, so many, malaria kills so many. So if you see in that context, initially, of course, we didn't know. I mean, initial panic was justified, but with the new information, the present panic is not justified. However, it will take time because people are panicked. Even you have listened to me for 1 hour. In my family members don't listen to me. Because
Okay, great. So I think we can safely conclude that the COVID-19 will end soon and is not going to last as long as the 1918 Spanish flu lasted. So that we don't have to be worried that there's a doomsday around the corner. With this, I think we.
I think we have come to an end of our session. I must say it is a very pleasant session and I enjoyed it very much. So thank you so much again, Prof. Banerjee, for very informative session. And most of all, I think what's interesting is that you have left us with many important unanswered questions. So it is apparent that the call is for every country to learn from their experience and to find the answers. So you have left us an open mind, and you successfully have also provoked our thoughts. So we hope one day perhaps you may want to visit us at PIDC.
Definitely, I want to have the biryani.
Yeah, sure, no problem. And we look forward to future collaboration as well. As for the viewers, thank you for your participation. We hope to have you join us in our future webinar series. And last but not least, stay safe, everyone. And thank you again.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Dr. Fawaz.
I will now hand over the session back to Dr. Fawaz.
Thank you so much, Professor Banerjee. Indeed, an enlightening presentation, thought-provoking presentation. And I have enjoyed it, and I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed. We have over 100 viewers viewing this webinar. So I'm very happy to share that with you. Thank you, Datin, for chairing the session. Thank you, Dr. Ajay, for co-chairing the session. And thank you, viewers, for joining the webinar. And I will be emailing a feedback form to you within 2 hours. Those who have registered, you will get it by email. And those viewers who have not been able to register with our last moment entries, don't worry. Please share your email address in the comment box, and I'll send you the feedback form. Okay. And we have more webinars coming up. And if our viewers would like us to keep them updated, please share your email in the chat box. And I'm sure we will keep you informed of all the new webinars that will be coming up. You can also follow us on our Penang International Dental College official Facebook page. So we keep updating our events there. So you can also know from there. So that's it from us. Take care of yourself, your friends, your families, and with lots of love and good wishes from Penang International Dental College. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.